Happy Friday! We are already at the first Friday of the month, and Sam and I are extremely excited to be bringing our Enneagram Type and Sexuality series. I am just waiting for her to hop on, and then once she has joined, we will get the conversation started. I can't believe it's already the first Friday of the month again. It came so quickly. But we're just waiting for Sam. I'm always hopping on a little bit early because we have had many technical issues, and so I'm hoping that today Sam doesn't have any technical issues in joining, and so I'm just waiting for her to pop on and then we will start. And here she is, and let me accept her request. It is supposed to today. All right, I am accepting it, and yay! We have had such good luck lately with all of this technological stuff. It's like the minute we decide to come on early, it works. Not a bad thing, right? Hi, Sam. Good to see you again.
Hi, Lyndsey. Happy Friday. Happy Friday.
I know. I can't believe it's already the first Friday of the month again. Here we are in June for Sexy First Friday, and we have a really fun series to kind of start us off. But we will just start with those brief introductions of us again, because some of you know who we are, some of you don't. So I will just introduce myself and then have Sam introduce herself, and then she's going to be kicking us off today. So my name is Lyndsey Fraser. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist and Enneagram accredited professional out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I have a private practice where I specialize in relationships and sexuality. Do you notice how I didn't say small private practice this time, Sam, as I often do? Which we will talk about is a 9 quality.
I haven't noticed that lately. Good job.
Well, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Sam E. Greenberg. I'm a sexuality researcher and Enneagram coach specializing in sexuality and relationships. I studied with the narrative tradition at Enneagram school, and my doctoral research focused on the intersection of Enneagram type and dominant instinct with patterns of sexual desire and expression. And I'll be talking a little bit about some of those research results today, because welcome to our new series for Sexy First Fridays, which is Enneagram Type and Sexuality series. So if you've been with us, we do a different topic every first Friday of the month on the intersection of Enneagram, sexuality, and relationships. We've done lots of topics. You can find all of those on our Instagrams. I have a story highlight with our past episodes. But we've decided to do one type per month, starting this month with type 9. So we can do more of a deep dive into subtypes, into people's questions about each type. So welcome to Type 9, the first of our series, and we are going to have, for some of the episodes, special guests of that type to come on talk about themselves. And our special guest for today is Lyndsey, because she is a 9 and she's our resident 9 expert. So I'm just going to be asking her, kind of interviewing her, asking her some of the questions that you guys wrote in. And if you're joining with us live, you can ask any burning questions you have about 9s and sexuality live, and we'll answer them. So with all of that context, why don't you take it away, Lyndsey, with a general overview of 9s and sexuality?
I will. It's interesting, Sam. Like, I am not normally nervous anymore when we get on these things, and I think I am today because I have to talk about my type and the things that we do well and maybe not so well in the sexual realm. And so it's been interesting. So if you notice that maybe I seem a little bit more nervous or uncomfortable, it's like I have to be putting myself a little bit on the spot. One of the things that I think is really interesting about Enneagram 9s is that we often look to other people to lead the sexual experience. And so there are many reasons why we do this, mostly because we don't want to have to deal with any discomfort if we are initiating something someone else might not have. Oftentimes, many of us don't actually know what we like or what we want. though we do know what we don't like. So that'll be a very interesting kind of perspective to talk a little bit about. And so it's just easier for us oftentimes when other people take the leads in sexual experiences so that we can then sort of go along. And then every once in a while we'll have these kind of gut intuitive things. We're like, ooh, don't like that. And then we'll often kind of tell you that we don't like that. One of the also very interesting things, and this is actually one of the questions that people asked, is how do you get nines to initiate more? And the interesting thing is we actually are initiating. You're probably missing it. We are very subtle in how we initiate. It's been really interesting because some of you know and some of you don't know, but we're also doing some focus groups right now with our colleague Frederick, where we're meeting with groups. And one of the very interesting things is all nines do some of these more subtle cues to initiate. And so we're doing things like touching your arm and brushing it, or giving you a little bit more attention. And it's just these, or like we're looking you kind of a little bit in the eyes. So it tends to be these like very subtle signs that many types don't actually pick up on. So I might say, is it possible your nine is initiating and you're missing it? At the same time, we need to be more assertive and more direct in sort of what it is that we need or want. One of the things that I do notice is that other withdrawal types are a little bit better oftentimes on picking up on some of the nines sort of signals. And we're thinking about fives and fours. But the interesting thing is, like, 'cause I've also talked about how my husband is a five. I have to be very explicit and very direct, but they also pick up on more of these subtle flirting cues. So it's kind of this interesting kind of dichotomy that's happening there with fives. But these are the two types that I see are a little bit more in tuned with sort of what the nine is doing. The rest of you probably have no clue, didn't even know that we're interested. And so we need to work better at actually letting you know. So that's a little bit of just kind of a quick little touch point of sort of some of the things that nines do sexually.
Cool. So I'm going to bring in some insights from research as well. So a lot of you might be familiar with my research, or if you're not, I measured a bunch of different things for each type, including sexually explicit materials use, BDSM participation, solo sexual desire, desire to behave by yourself sexually, partnered sexual desire, and then all different types of desire cues. So lots of different things, sexual assertiveness. So just give you an overview of my results for nine specifically to give you a research picture, because we try to bring you the research angle and the therapeutic angle. So nine scored actually really quite high on sexually explicit materials use. That would be, like your pornography, erotica, those types of things. Surprisingly to me, that was against what my hypothesis. They are almost the highest type in their use of that after eights. So that's one of the findings that's interesting. And then a lot of the other stuff they're scoring in the middle, just in the middle on BDSM participation, in the middle on overall dyadic sexual desire, that's partnered sexual desire, in the middle on how comfortable they are in going without sex. And that is dependent on subtype, which maybe we can get into a little bit, where our self-preservation nines are more comfortable going without sex for longer, but we'll come back to that. Nines are scoring in the middle on desire cues, meaning all different types of stuff can turn them on, but they're just falling in the middle of all the types for it. One of the other things that stands out, though, is nines' position on sexual assertiveness. Nines are the all-time lowest of all the types on sexual assertiveness. It's important, though, to say how I measured that, which is using a scale, the Hurlburt Index of Sexual Assertiveness, which asks questions like, do you agree or disagree with, I feel comfortable telling my partner verbally what I want during sex? If something's coming up in sexuality and I don't like it, I feel comfortable saying something, in words, basically. So I'm thinking that a lot of nines communication style, after talking with Lyndsey, is being missed by that scale, because nines are big nonverbal communicators. But according to what would be a more stereotypical measure of assertiveness in sexuality, nines are dead last on that. And this is something that comes up a lot in my work with coaching, and I think Lyndsey in your work too with partners of nines, is they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what they like. I don't know if they don't like things. They're not speaking up. You know, what do I do? So hopefully Lyndsey will answer some of those questions as I get into kind of interviewing her. Sorry you're on the hot seat today, Lyndsey. So do we want to just dive into questions?
Yeah, let's go into it then.
We got quite a few questions from people on just wanting to know about their nine partners or from nines themselves. So we're going to try to answer as many as we can, or Lyndsey, you're going to be answering them, but we'll try to get through as many as we can. And starting with subtypes, so we're going to be talking about subtypes of each type in every episode. So we got a question about subtypes, and the question was just like, tell us more about subtypes of nines. I don't necessarily relate to the nine and sex stereotypes. This is from a nine. Is it my subtype? So Lyndsey, can you dive into some of the subtype nuance for nines and sexuality?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is like one of the things that we're sort of discovering also for these focus groups is that there isn't any nine that actually fits the caricature that we sort of think of when we think of the nines. And so the interesting thing that has come out of sort of those focus groups is we actually just finished up nines and eights. And sevens. And so it's just been kind of interesting to see that there really none of us are fitting that, in the sense that we look at energetically, self-preservation nines actually have quite a bit of autonomy. They're quite grounded. They're more energetic than you might actually believe or think. But just as Sam had said, they're still going to be a little bit more influenced by context, right? Things are going to need to be just right to want to move into sexuality. We've talked about self-preservation dominance, sort of like, you know, if I'm horny and I'm hungry, I need to be fed before I want to have sex, right? That's still going to be the case here with self-preservation nines, but maybe not as much as some of the other self-preservation types. They're able to push through a little bit more of the context, is some of the things that we're noticing sort of through the focus groups. The most dreamy kind of floaty ones really are your sexual nines, in the sense that, like, I noticed that, like, there's just this little bit more diffuse, I don't even know how you would call the energy. It's very, like, I noticed that, like, you might be a little more sleepy when you're actually around them. And, you know, we have some ideas of why that might be happening, but as we kind of discuss that more, we can bring that in at a later point in time. And then social, so we're kind of in the middle too. They're also much more energetic than you may think. But the interesting thing, when you take the three of them, sexual nines will lose all of their autonomy and kind of like merge completely into the other partner. They may not even, they will become almost a replica of the partner that they're in. And one of the things Sam said that we're not going to see in focus groups is that when a sexual nine is attracted to someone, there may be more energetic focus in those moments when the attraction is happening, and they may become more alive, but they will merge fully into the partner and become the partner. If they have not done their work or they're not aware of themselves, they're almost just it's almost like there is the partner, and the sexual nine is basically the partner and part of the partner. Social nines and self-preservation nines are going to keep much more autonomy. They're going to be a little bit more protective of autonomy. They may push back a little bit more if someone is, that they don't feel like they have that. So that's been a really interesting thing that I don't think we necessarily expected. But similar to the things that we've talked about before around energetically, how the instincts approach sex, it's all about bonding and connection for the social nines. Self-preservation nines, it's more about the orgasm or the pleasure of sex, and then, you know, playing with the sexual energy and that sexuality piece of that. Interestingly enough, most of the nines are still going to focus on their pleasure while being sexual. So sometimes we think of other types not as much, be more like, I get more pleasure out of you getting pleasure. Like twos might be a good example of that, for instance. Nines are like, I will go along with you and do what you want to do, but I'm also going to do things to get my pleasure met in the moment. So, when you were talking about your scale, right, it's like we give body language around initiation, what's working or not working. We may know how to move our bodies to have orgasm or to have pleasure, but we're not really verbalizing that. We're just kind of doing those things during the experience, but we do care about our pleasure as well. It's sort of like we go along to get along with you, but we want to make sure we get a little bit of something out of the experience too.
That's interesting you brought that up, because another thing that I measured in the study was this question around my partner's pleasure is more important than my own, agree or disagree with that. And twos are the ones that are saying, yes, my partner's pleasure is more important. Nines are in the middle for that. I mean, they're a little more towards two, they're more towards that side, but overall they're in the middle. So it would be a little bit of a mistake to think that nines are only caring about the partner's pleasure, like you said. And the other thing I want to bring in that kind of makes me laugh, as you were saying, for sexual nines, they really become the partner, and then the other two subtypes have more autonomy. That's within the nine. Like, from my perspective looking in, from an outside perspective looking in, all three subtypes of nine are going to merge to where if they're unhealthy or haven't done their work, they're going to look like the partner. Such that if you're doing coaching or therapy with them, or you're even friends with, a couple and there's a nine in the couple, it can start to be as if there's the partner of the nine twice, rather than the nine themselves and the partner. And I found that talking with couples with a nine in them, it often feels like I'm talking to the one person that's not the nine, and the nine's just there. So we get all of this merging within the nine, but within the fact that they all sometimes do that, sexual nines do it the most, and self-preservation nines the least of the nines. Just want to clarify on that point.
You're right. We also don't often voice, it's interesting, like when we talk about, one of the interesting things is that it's like, once in a sexual experience, even if we're not enjoying it, we just kind of hang out and continue. So until you've done a lot of growth and people know how to sort of advocate or assert, but like, I think especially when you see nines when they're younger, or if they haven't done self-growth or they haven't done work. So what we think is autonomy probably is not quite as much autonomy as maybe other types might have. But it is interesting. Most of us will go along to get along, even in sexual experiences. And so like if we're bored, but you're enjoying yourself, okay, well, it's going to kind of continue in the experience with you and get through it and then have it be done. And maybe we'll tell you that, if we're really good at being assertive, we may or may not tell you that it didn't work or did work for us. So I think that can be a hard part for people that are partnered with us as well.
Let's talk about that more. And I also want to look at this question we just got. Any gender difference around the importance of personal sexual gratification? Like, as a male, my gratification is pretty easy, and I tend to prioritize my partner's pleasure. So why don't we talk a little bit about that next? Because one of the things I forgot to say in the research is, as we have these focus groups that are unfolding research, we're finding that nines are all saying that they can reach orgasm pretty easily, all three subtypes. So, Lyndsey, do you want to speak to that more, to that question we just got?
Yeah, I think what I see is that, even the men that are nines are a little bit more like, they'll still be focused on the partner's pleasure, but they'll also make sure that their pleasure is being met. So they're still also going to look, and I think it's harder when we think about sort of that men in general, if we're in heterosexual relationships, feel a lot more pressure to sort of guide the sexual situation and what's happening and occurring. And for the men that have been in that, some of them can take on that role when needed. And then others, it's sort of like there can be a little bit of like still looking to the partner, but then feeling some of the roles around masculinity to have to step in and take that role and take that piece of it. One of the things that most nines don't like is any sort of aggression, or like too much aggression during sexuality. They don't mind assertiveness, but they don't like a lot of aggression. And so it's been interesting because even the men in the groups are sort of saying they would prefer that their partner lead, but oftentimes because they are the men, it's sort of the expectation that they do. So there's a little bit of both of those things sort of happening and occurring. But yes, you're right. One of the things that we did see, which I think is really interesting with nines, most nines, I mean, you might hear like when they were earlier on in their 20s or younger, maybe when they didn't know how to get pleasure, maybe having more difficulty to reach orgasm. But most nines reach orgasm fairly easily. Most of them know how to get their orgasm needs met, men and women. So this is a really interesting perspective, because even all of the women that were nines were saying, I orgasm pretty easily. It's not that hard for me to have pleasure. And actually we're seeing, which we'll talk more about, is that's true for the eights as well.
So another question that came a few times in different iterations was this idea of nines not knowing what they want, but they do know what they don't want. We got a couple questions about that from nines themselves, asking like, why does it feel like I know what I don't want only? And then from partners of nines, like, why does it seem like my partner only knows what they don't want? And that's something I've heard echoed in couples, is like, okay, I'm driving blind here, and then my partner will be like, no, I don't like that, and that's the only feedback I'm getting. So can you talk about why that is, Lyndsey? Why does it seem like nines know what they don't want more easily?
You know, I think a big part of that is that they're going along with sort of, they like it better when the partner sort of leads the sexual experience, because they don't want to have sort of the conflict or the uncomfortableness that might come with them initiating or being more assertive or taking the lead sort of in those sexual experiences. And so then what comes out of that is that they're engaged in sexual experiences, going along with sort of what is pleasurable for the partner. And maybe they know how to reach their orgasm and things like that, but they don't necessarily know by moving their bodies and things like that. They don't necessarily know like what's, like a lot of us, like when the question's asked, like, what's your favorite sexual position? We're all like, I don't know, you know, like we can't answer that question. We don't actually know because we never actually have thought about it, right? We've just gone with like, well, what's my partner's favorite, you know? I mean, one thing we did here is uncomfortability. Most of us don't want to be put like up against a wall where there's uncomfortability, or like some of these types of things that are happening and occurring, or like, we'll do it because you like it. We're like, doesn't really quite work for me. So I think it's the reason we know what we don't like is our body is giving us indications of that. So it's a guttural sort of like no, right? Which I think is a common response because we are a gut type, that we're going to have some of those come into play. And so we have more guttural no's than we have guttural yeses. And so with this one in particular, it's really something that the nine needs to explore outside of the sexual relationship to get more awareness of like what works or what doesn't work for them. You know, I've brought up a few times sort of I'm not going to remember what the book is called. Hot and Unbothered, that's what it is. Hot and Unbothered is a sexuality book, or I have a book called Little Bit Kinky sometimes that I suggest for couples to look at as well. And why I'm suggesting sort of like having a book is that when you're reading a book, and you can even do this with the erotic novels too, because sometimes if you're reading an erotic novel, you might, you know, there might be a scene in there that really kind of turns you on, like paying attention to like what's happening sort of during that scene. So it's paying attention to body sensations, emotions, and thoughts, especially when you're reading some sort of sexuality book that is giving you different types of sexual behaviors or actions or things that you can participate in. And it's really sitting with yourself and paying attention to those things to understand sort of like what does turn you on. But I find that it's harder to do with your partner because you become more focused on like going with the flow, not disrupting the environment, not wanting to rock the boat, that you're not giving your body enough time to pay attention in those specific moments of like what's turning you on or off until you've done some of this work and you're able to kind of be more sort of in that actual moment with that. So it's a lot of individual work that has to happen outside of that you could do with individual therapists or just body sensations, emotions, and thoughts when you're reading sexual behaviors. You're going to know intuitively what things are like a turn on. Probably the turn offs are going to come really quickly, but I think just being able to have some sort of tool to kind of be able to do that, because most nines, this is a huge growth point for us to get into touch with what we actually want, what we actually like, and being able to sort of be assertive and have those experiences happen sexually.
That was a great information, Lyndsey. One thing that's coming up for me is I've heard from nines also don't be in the moment being like, what do you want next? You know, what do you like? What's your favorite? You know, what do you want me to do? It's really, not only do you guys not like that, but it's really overwhelming. It's actually a turn off because you get stressed out by it.
That is so, yes, that is so true. It's been really interesting as we're doing these focus groups. All of us said, don't talk to us during. Don't talk. That being said, we do like we actually get turned on by the pleasure sounds of sex. So like the noises that and one of the things is too, like we like really natural, organic sexual experiences. We want it to be like real. And so there is a little bit of that as well. And so like when we hear those noises of pleasure that are coming from you, that's a huge turn on for us, because it's like, this is organic, this is real, this is happening right in the moment. But when things feel contrived or like orchestrated, that can also be sort of a turn off to the 9. They want it to be more of an organic, natural sort of sexual experience. So like more of that, like, yeah, I can't think of other words to kind of say that, but that was one of the things that came out of. But like, it was so funny. We were all like, yeah, don't talk. No, do not do that. Do not talk to me during. You need to just shut up and do.
And one of the things that happens that's funny is partners of 9s, they'll get frustrated or start to get in like a spiral about the fact that they're not getting feedback, and they push more for feedback. So it can be like a little bit of a downward spiral as the partner of the 9, especially if they're assertive, they're like not getting verbal feedback. They're like, okay, well, I'm just going to ask you for verbal feedback. And then the 9 gets more withdrawn because that's more stressful. So I'd say like, tuning into the subtle and body language level feedback that Lyndsey's talking about is really important. We have so many more questions, so let's try to answer a few more. One of the other ones was how to encourage a 9 to initiate sex. And I think this is really important because of what you were talking about the subtleties of how 9s do that. So can you just tell the people more about that?
Your 9 likely is initiating sex. It's just they're doing it in such a subtle way. So it ends up being sort of like the light touch on the arm, or the kind of like, it's very tactile in how they're letting you know that they're interested. And part of that, I think, happens because there is sort of this, like, we are so afraid of being in environments that are uncomfortable or conflictual. And so like when I think that a lot of us have learned that when we do subtle initiation, it's like, well, if you reject me or you're not interested, I don't have to feel the conflict or the issue that might be coming from that. But what's happening is we're still creating conflict because our partners aren't knowing that we're interested, right? All of you know that, like, I am, I've talked a little bit about my relationship with my husband, and this has had to be a huge growth point for me because, like, he gets some of the subtleties, but like he misses a lot of the rest of it. And so I have to be like very direct and to the point of what I want and what I'm looking for when I want to engage in sexual activity. And that can be anxiety provoking for me, but like one of the things that I've told clients in my office and that I tell a lot of 9s is it's like a little bit of uncomfortability results in like, high uncomfortability in the moment results in more peace later on. And so our ability to learn how to be assertive and sort of ask for what we need or want sexually, one, it makes our partners feel more desired, especially the ones that can't pick up on sort of more of our subtle cues. Also, we have to be okay with like, how do we navigate when like our partners are not interested in sex, right? And that discomfort that comes with that, and that ability to have better communication on what we want and what we don't want sexually, so that we can have more pleasurable sort of sexual experiences. And so to me, this is just another one of those areas that can be really huge growth for 9s, is learning how to ask for what you need and want, which means first off, you have to go on your own and figure out what you like and what you don't like. So reading a sexuality book or reading an erotic, I've always loved like what I call like books that have good stories with some smut in them. What do those smutty scenes look like? Like, what do you like about that, right? Like, what's happening? What's occurring? Like, those are good indications to you if they're giving you more sexual energy to bring back, like, oh, I was reading this book and, this person was doing these sexual behaviors. Or even saying, hey, read this little huge turn on me. Read this little section. Tell me what you think, right? If we're a little bit more nervous or anxious of sort of bringing that up. But it gives our partners the capacity to know sort of like what turns us on and what doesn't turn us on. But it's like 9s, we got to do some individual work and then bring back some more assertiveness to our partners so that they can feel desired as well. Because I think a lot of my complaints before my previous partner is that they didn't know. And I'm like, but I'm giving you the signals. What do you mean you don't know?
Okay, lightning round because there's a lot more, but we'll try to do like really fast answers to the last couple. Um, so a 9 was asking, I'm having trouble staying out of my head during sex. Do you have any suggestions?
So a lot of times when I have people that are stuck in their heads around sexuality and not being able to be in the moment, I highly encourage like body scan meditations or body and breath type meditations outside of sexuality to get you more in tuned with like your body, get you more into the actual body so that you have better capacity than when you are in sexual experiences to sort of know how to get back into that physical body when it's happening. One of the very interesting things that I think a lot of 9s do is sort of like, we all kind of have like what I call like our inner calm or like our sleepy place or our dissociated place that we like to go to. And a lot of us are doing this when we're in sexual experiences as well, especially when like we're bored or we're not that into it. Or so like we don't, you know, so there can be, some people will have the thinking, but a lot of 9s actually don't have problem with like thinking about things. It's more of like, sort of like I'm out of body watching what's happening versus actually being in my body and experiencing it. So I think all 9s can benefit from some of that like body scan or body and breath meditations just to be more in the physical body and to be able to experience what's happening and occurring.
Okay, good advice. Let's try to get 2 more in. Want to be super fast. If you're interested in a 9, what's the best way to approach exploring the relationship?
Subtle and slowly.
That
They
was a
like
perfect lightning round answer.
like a really like they don't like super aggressive, you know, like come-ons and things like that. They want more slow and steady and subtle initiation. So especially if you're dealing with like a social 9, they want more relational tactics before you move into sexual tactics. So getting to know them, you know, doing those types of things. But like even the way that you're going to touch them, that they're really wanting more of the subtle type touches that you're actually doing as well. And so it's that ability to sort of be able to have that relationship building and that, but then it's kind of like once you go, they can kind of go too. So it's just that at the beginning, they like it more slow and steady and subtle.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's end on this one. Someone asked, what does growth look like for a 9?
Growth for a 9 is really being able to be more assertive, asking for what you need and want sexually, knowing what brings you pleasure and asking for that pleasure. I think that it can be hard, you know, in general for people around a lot of the sexual shame that a lot of us carry and have. So, I mean, a lot of it is like being able to be like, you know, I do deserve pleasure. You know, how do I advocate and assert for what I want? It's not that dissimilar to other things that you do, right? It's that ability to like, I'm going to go through high discomfort to get more of what I want longer term. And really, it's that ability to know what I need and want, paying attention to body sensations, emotions, and thoughts, and that avocation for sort of being able to ask for what you need or want. I have had to really do this in my own marriage, and I will say it really does bring about such a much more pleasurable and enjoyable sex life.
That was perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna try to summarize into a soundbite all of the advice that you gave. So for partners of 9s who want to know how to be a better sexual partner for their 9, 9s do not like aggression, you know, don't come in super aggressively. They generally would prefer the partner to lead because that leads to a less conflicted environment. Don't talk to them during sex. Don't demand answers. Don't demand in the moment responses. Don't talk, just do. But you know, you do express your pleasure in terms of sounds or things like that. And um, organic sexual experiences, not orchestrated around, you know, that makes 9s feel more comfortable. And then finally, for 9s, do your individual work on body sensations, emotions, and thoughts without your partner there so that you can then bring that in. Was that a good summary, Lyndsey? What am I forgetting?
That was a great summary. I don't even think I can think of anything you forgot.
Okay, great.
Little
So
like,
I
here you go.
got into a soundbite. So I hope that everyone watching, if you're a 9 or a partner of a 9, got something to take away that you didn't know before. Send us your questions about 9s that we didn't answer, and we're happy to do like a post series or story series about 9s to answer your additional questions. And tune in with us in July for 8s with a special guest. And we're going to be second Friday of the month, just this once for July, because we have the holiday weekend and some travel and stuff happening. So we'll be the second Friday of July for 8s. Send us your 8 questions as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about our 8s, another gut type. So we'll kind of go through 2 gut types before we move to head types, but it'll be interesting to see how they're different and similar to us 9s.
And you got a comment. Thanks for tuning in. It's very helpful. I'm so glad. Send us your questions. We're happy to answer them. And thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for joining. See you next month for the second Sexy Friday of the month. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Lyndsey.
Bye.